Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Change for the Better. My name is Melissa, and I will be your webinar producer for today's event. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You have joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default on a muted line. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them throughout. You can also download materials in the handout section of the handouts pane in the control panel. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view the recording. I would now like to introduce you to Ty Wheeler.
Good morning, everybody.
Relationship Manager for TrainingPros. Ty, over to you. I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melissa. So thank you, everybody, for joining TrainingPros today for LearningView's webinar, Change for the Better. I am Ty Wheeler, and I am in my third year as a Relationship Manager with TrainingPros. I transitioned from organizational leadership to instructional design and adult education. I worked in the financial, manufacturing, and technology sectors. I joined TrainingPros to pursue my passion for learning and development. So TrainingPros has been serving L&D leaders for 23 years. When you have more projects than people, we can provide you with the right L&D consultant to start your project with confidence. We do this by scheduling consultation, selecting your consultant, and setting you up to start your project with confidence. Examples of our talent include instructional designers, virtual classroom designers, L&D project managers, and a host of others that you see listed here. And TrainingPros relationships have relationship managers across the U.S. They are practitioners in the field of L&D, and we are waiting to hear from you. Recently, we have been recognized in the training industry as one of the top 20 places to work, as well as placed on the top 2020 list for outsourcing. We have been recognized in the list of diversity firms, and we were voted Atlanta's best places to work. So those are really things that we've been proud to share with you today. So thank you all for being a part of that. And so today I wanted to introduce our presenter, Julie Hodack. Julie delivers coaching and training reinforced by an understanding of workplace dynamics and the challenges of contemporary life. Her professional and personal experience have taught her that mindful behavioral change is the key to effective leadership, life satisfaction, and wellness. Some of Julie's clients are IBM, CDC, CARE, AT&T, MGM, among a list of others that she's been able to serve. So thank you all for attending, and I'm so excited to get started, and I want to turn it over to Julie Hodack. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ty, and welcome everybody. We're going to spend the next hour together talking about how to implement some type of change in your life. As Ty told you, I have done a lot of work in the area of change. I'm a certified leadership coach and also have a master's in instructional design. So I do a lot around adult education. I became curious about this topic from my work in coaching and working with executives. I was interested in why some people could make changes and some people couldn't. No matter, when the desire was the same, the motivation was the same. So from that, this workshop was born. What we're going to do today, and it's an hour, so we're going to do a broad brush just to heighten your awareness around a habit that you have chosen that you'd like to work with. Learn a little bit about a habit and how it, how it forms, and then spend the second half of our time together talking about what you can do about it. A lot of times in presentations and when we're working on something, so much time is spent on what the problem is, but I believe in this instance, we kind of know what it is. We'll get a little education around it, and then we'll talk about how to change it. So once again, we're going to review the habit you chose, and if you haven't, you have the opportunity from the handout section over in the control panel to go ahead and download the pre-work. You can kind of give it some thought as we go along. We're going to learn how a habit is actually formed, a little bit of an anatomy lesson. Explore the anatomy of the habit, what are the pieces of it, create an awareness around the habit, and then the last thing you'll do is walk away with the tools and the knowledge to build a framework to change. It's a conscious process that you'll go through, and we're going to talk more about it. So how many of you were able to download and do the pre-work? You have a show of hands? If you haven't, what we talked about was, thinking about something in mind that you are interested in working on and thinking about as we go through this. So what are some of the habits you'd like to work on? So those of you who've raised your hand, would anybody like to come off of mute and tell us a little bit, or type into the question area what it is that you'd like to work on? Catherine, would you mind telling us a little something you'd like to work on, or Lewis? Becoming a better listener. All right, anybody else? That's a good one. Anybody else, anything that they'd like to work on? Well, I appreciate that. Eating more
Lewis,
mindfully.
I
Yeah.
have unmuted your line, Lewis, as your hand was up. So if you'd like to go ahead and tell us, please go ahead.
Lewis? Well, while we're waiting for Lewis, Jade said, stop second guessing myself. That's an interesting one. We can certainly work on that. What else do you have? Stop with the energy zappers. That is one that's near and dear to me myself. What is it that takes energy away from us? Kind of, how does that happen? Great. Well, these are some things that are going to be good to use as examples as we go through it. So I appreciate everyone taking the time to do the pre-work. So I'll kind of cue up the, cue here. Some of the pitfalls or bad habits, here's things that I hear about frequently, and especially in business or around coaching, people in management. Jumping to conclusions with staff, asking leading questions. Often I hear from the executives that I'm working with that they're coaching their staff, but in reality, they're asking leading questions to get them to the answer that they feel is right. Becoming distracted, which I think is really important when we're talking about remote work now. It's so easy with so many things around, or interrupting, cutting off a staff member. And I think, we're all kind of guilty of that as well. So if we think about these things, somebody, I think, is off of mute. So in the pre-work, those of you that filled it out, there were 3 things that I was interested in. What behavior do you want to change? Why did you select this behavior? And the impact it has on you. So for example, jumping to conclusions with my staff. I've asked somebody to create a presentation, and before they get 4 or 5 slides in, I already know the answer and what I want to be done. Why did I select this behavior? Well, I'm really working on assumptions, and I'm not developing my team by allowing them to present in front of an executive group, or also to, communicate their idea in a way that's effective and efficient. So how does this impact my work with others? Well, I may notice that my team, doesn't volunteer to do presentations, or they may simply just, kind of throw something out there knowing that it's going to be overridden. It's a bit demoralizing as well. So those are the three pieces that we wanted to do before we came into the presentation. So now I'm going to come to you once again and ask you, in the habits that you identified, what self-discoveries did you make? Is there anything that you figured out, wow, this is kind of a pattern with me? Energy zappers every day at 3 o'clock. I'm tired. I notice when at the end of the night I eat, something real sugary, it just knocks me out. What patterns emerged, or also interestedly, what impacts you at work? Anybody like to share? And you're welcome to come off mute or just put it into the question box.
Hey, this is Lewis.
Hey, Lou.
Hey, good morning. That one of the my habit was distraction, and kind of one of the patterns I've realized is that it's worse when I don't the night before, the morning of the day, make a list of my most important things to do. When I make the list, I seem to become less distracted. So I think one of the patterns was that I am my own worst enemy in some ways by not taking the time to create a list of priorities for the day. And that's something I need to, maybe that's the habit. I don't make a list, but that's what I observed.
Yeah, maybe great. That's key. So you know what's going to happen either way. So you have a bad habit and you can correct it with a good habit. Good. Thank you for sharing. And we'll keep that in mind. We'll come back to that. Anybody else? Any discoveries you made when you were thinking about it? Your energy zappers or not being able to listen, microphone issues, Darby. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Any thoughts around the patterns? Well, we're going to talk more about that as we go. That's a key piece to what we're going to be doing. So now I have a quick poll for you. If you think about your day, from the minute you get up till you go to bed at night, what percentage of your daily activity do you feel is actually a habit and not a decision? Please just go ahead and select the answer that you think is correct.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Once again, please make your selection after you have read the question. Once you've made your selection, you should be good to go. And then I will share the results in about 30 seconds. All right, we do have 81% who have voted. So let's see if we can get at least 85% to vote, and then I will go ahead and close the poll in about 8 seconds. Perfect. I'm closing the poll, and I will share the results.
20%, 60%, 20 and 80%. Okay, so 60% of our day is thought to be around habit. Actually, it's 40 to 45%. This is typically what research has shown, and well within the last year. We believe that it may be a decision, and in this case, it's interesting, a lot of people feel that habits really are a large part of the day, but in fact, it's about 40 to 45%. So let's jump into it. Now comes the anatomy lesson. The neuroscience of a habit. So there are two main areas of the brain that are involved in the formation and the maintenance of a habit: the prefrontal cortex and the basal ganglia. Let's start with the prefrontal cortex. It's called, kind of responsible for some of the executive function of the brain. It regulates long-term and short-term thinking. it houses memory, and it also controls impulses and emotions. So let's break it down. This is one of my habits. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it always is right around 3 o'clock, I often hit a real lull. And somebody was talking about energy issues. I mean, I'm all about that. I actually worked at an organization one time where they had big jars of candy, like licorice and M&Ms. And every day at 3 o'clock, I just felt as though I needed something. I was kind of tired. So let's say one day at 3 o'clock, I am at my office, this is the old days, and I look and I see somebody heading into the break room, and it kind of reminds me, there's coffee in there, I could use a little bump. I think I'll go in and grab a cup of coffee. So I do. I come out, I go back to my desk, and I'm refreshed. My prefrontal cortex takes note of this. So here it is in a nutshell. It's very simple. A habit is made up of 3 components: a cue, a routine, and a reward. This was put together by Charles Duhigg, and he worked with some MIT researchers with mice in a maze, kind of determining, what is a habit and what drives them, what's the impulse, and how does it all play out. And this is what they came up with. And you'll hear more and more these days people talking about change in habits, and they may not say cue, they may say trigger, they may not say routine, they may say behavior, they may not say reward. It's like, the payoff. But these 3 components are what essentially we're going to be talking about for the rest of the day, the rest of our time together. So 3 o'clock comes, I have some coffee, I go back to my desk, I feel good. Or I go out to my kitchen, make myself a cup of tea. I come back, I'm refreshed, I can finish out the rest of the day, I'm refocused. I do this, 2 or 3 times a week, and then it becomes a little more consistent, 3 or 4 times a week. And then finally, my basal ganglia will come into play. So it communicates with the other regions of the brain, and it allows you to do complex things like ride a bike, tie a shoe, drive your car. So it's responsible for executing a skill pattern. So it has put a lot of different actions together. And it's something you've had to learn to do, but eventually the basal ganglia takes over and it becomes automatic, if you think about that. So when the cue, routine, and reward that originate in the prefrontal cortex are practiced enough, remember the prefrontal cortex likes intense emotion and sensation. It's like, I really like that, I'm gonna hold on to that. Eventually, it moves into the other area of the brain where it just becomes an executed pattern or an ingrained habit. And it's like it happens automatically. So here's how my craving for caffeine got started and then all of a sudden took hold. How many of you during the course of the day, say for example, there's a certain time that triggers something off? For example, me, I don't even have to look at the clock. I know now that it's around 3 o'clock. It may be a little bit before, a little bit after. Nicole says yes in caps. Right. It kicks it off, and before I know it, I'm having that cup of coffee. I'm back at my desk. It's a cycle that then bears itself out. So there's the cue neuron that fires first. There's a routine that happens, and then a reward. So it's almost as though they're wired together. The neurons that fire together are wired together. So once the habit's established, it's automatic. You're back at your desk, you enjoy the reward of your afternoon habit, and away you go. Let's say all of a sudden, this becomes something that you want to change. You are eating sweets at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you need to cut them out. They are not doing you any good. So we're going to switch to the second half of the program right now, talking about how to break the habit. But before we do, I'm curious, would anyone like to talk a little bit about their thoughts around this? Does it make sense to you? Do you have any questions about how it gets started? Anything at all? Please feel free to come off mute also and talk. I think it's great to hear from anybody. Anybody at all? Anything to share? Any thoughts?
I do, Julie. This is Ty.
Hi, Ty.
Okay, so yeah, because I'm a co-organizer, I couldn't raise my hand, so sorry. So, which brings me to my point. So I have a habit of interrupting, and when people are trying to talk with me about things and I get excited, sometimes I'm afraid that I'm going to forget. Other times I think I'm going to be left out of the conversation, and it will end before I've had a chance to say anything, or I'm looking for spaces to jump in and there aren't any. But I don't know how it became a habit, but I find myself, what I do now is I try to write things down so I don't forget and maybe try to circle back to it. But sometimes I feel like the moment has passed for that part of the conversation. I don't know. But I'm working on it, but that is one of the habits I've been working on trying to break. I don't know
Okay,
how.
so great. And you know what? That is a wonderful habit. I mean, not a wonderful habit, but a good example of what we're going to be talking about, and actually one that a lot of people want to work on. So I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. And we're going to come back to it. Carol said, I think it makes sense. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add? All right, we are going to keep going. So we've talked about to this point, what it is that you'd like to work on. And let's see here. We've got a question. It says, are we able to see other questions or only the ones we type? Melissa, I'm going to throw that to you. I think we should be able to send, it depends on who you send it to, I believe. There's a send privately and a send to all.
Correct. If you won't be able to see questions that are placed in the Q&A area. So only the ones that you're typed. If you put it in the chat box, that's if they send it to the entire audience.
Okay, so they have the option to do either?
No, they would have to just place it in the Q&A.
Okay, thanks. All right, anybody else have anything they'd like to share or put in there? Leanne. We don't have the option to see each other. And also, I can only see one question at a time, one answer written at a time.
I can see the questions here. I see a list of questions. This is Ty.
If you're the,
So,
yep, organizers only can see a list of all the questions.
would you like me to go?
Yeah, do, Ty, would you? Because I can only see one question at a time.
Okay, so here's what we have so far in the question list. So one was, it's not necessarily a question, but I think it was an answer to a question. So being a better listener, eating more mindfully, stop guessing. I thought you saw those.
Mm-hmm.
The energy zappers, but the other ones were selected the behavior based on being exhausted personally and professionally, and how does it impact my work, not able to find balance. So let's see. It's the same thing as, operant is this the same thing as operant conditioning? So that's one question from Mark.
Is it the same thing as operant conditioning? In a way, it is. You have to be a little more mindful around it, but that is a good analogy. It's a fine line in difference, but that's a good question. It is in that you're always going to have a reward, and we're going to cover this as we go forward. It is in some ways, and then in a few ways, it's a little bit different. So let's go ahead and walk through the content, and we'll kind of keep that in the forefront. But that's a good question. Thank you.
And there's one other comment here. The only way that, so Leanne says, the only way that I've had success breaking a habit is to replace it with a new one, which I think is great. I think that's what we're getting to here.
Yeah, exactly. And Leanne, I'd be interested to know what the habit is that you have broken in the past. So many. Oh, she's a master. You're a master. Well, thank you. Well, I'm going to ask you to chime in as we keep going. You probably have some good information to share with the group. So breaking a habit. there's no one prescription that'll change all habits. I mean, like Leanne, I have changed quite a few habits and worked on them. And each time it takes a bit of different methodology and a lot of thought around it. So how I go about giving up coffee is different from how I organize my day, is different from working with a difficult personality at work. So each thing requires more thought and more conscious effort. So, you know, things are changing, but still there is the common thought that, well, you know, just white knuckle it, quit cold turkey, use your willpower. You know, if you want it bad enough, you can do it. So let me ask, and I'm really interested to hear this, how many of you have had success just breaking a habit cold turkey? I am not going to do this anymore, and you don't. Nicole, great. Can you tell me what the habit was that you broke? Would you like to come off mute and talk for a minute? If not, you know, please don't feel as though you have to, but I'd love to hear what you have to say. Nicole, would you care to expound a little bit more? Being seen as confrontational is a habit that you have been able to break cold turkey. And can you tell me just how you went about it? Absolutely great. By being mindful and active listening. Plenty of practice. Okay, so would it be safe to say that you recognized it, you realized that you didn't want to do it anymore, and so you kind of put something in place for it of that? So instead of being confrontational, you maybe sat back and listened and watched. Is that a fair assessment? Absolutely, great. How about you, Leanne? Anything that you've been able to overcome cold turkey? It felt much better, exactly, I bet. And what's that? Ty, can you read that for me? Oh, the quietest person in the room is the smartest. Right. You know, there's the old adage, you have two ears and one mouth. Great.
So the one for Leanne, it says, the only thing I was able to quit cold turkey without replacing it had to do with health. She said she had to cut out gluten entirely, and there was a reward, and she felt much better. I'm just going to say personally, I don't know how she did it. I don't think I could.
I know that's a hard one, cutting out gluten. But I would imagine if you felt bad when you ate it, that would help. Thanks. I had my grandfather could quit. You know, he would say, "Today I am not going to do this." He'd make like a, you know, a proclamation and be able to do it. And he quit smoking cigarettes, and then he quit drinking. And then, but at this point, he's like in his 80s, he decided that he was going to quit having a bowl of ice cream at the end of every evening, and he could not do it. So it's interesting, you know, he could put his mind to some things, but I always hoped that, you know, there was a trickle down of that gene to me, because I really admired him being able to do that. So some of you have been able to use cold turkey, and we're going to break that down a little bit, but I think you'll find for the most part that cold turkey doesn't work. They talk about willpower and the willpower muscle, and how you start out your morning, and today I am not going to interrupt John when he's talking in the team meeting. And as the meeting wears on, you find that your willpower muscle gets weaker and weaker, and eventually, you know, you're overcome and you do interrupt him, or you're not going to have a glass of wine while you're fixing dinner. And as the day wears on, you find that your mind is saying, one won't hurt, you know. So your willpower does tend to weaken. They say as you make more decisions, it becomes weaker and weaker. So we're going to take a different approach. And we're going to talk about the different pieces of the habit. So let me ask you here once again as another poll, which of these typically are the cue or the trigger to your habit? Is it the time of day? Is it the location, the people you're around, or the emotions that you're feeling? And the poll's open.
Yeah. Once again, please go ahead and respond to the poll question. I will close in 30 seconds. All right, we do have 77 who have voted. Let's see
Great.
if we can get to that 85%. Once again, please make your selection. Once you've made your selection, you are good to go. All right, for the sake of time, I am going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results.
Emotion. What are some of the emotions? Real quick, just type them into the question box. What are some of the emotions that you feel that kick off your habit? Frustration. What else? Does anybody have any positive emotions? Depression. Okay, thank you. Boredom. Exactly. Exactly. What else? A couple more? All right, well, thank you. We're going to jump right into it. So we're going to talk about how we're going to make a change. The cue is always going to happen. There are always going to be people that cause you to feel a certain way. You're always going to experience emotion throughout the course of the day. You're also always going to be in a certain location or a time of day. So for time of day, I talked about 3 o'clock for me is a big time of day. Location, at the end of the day, after we finish dinner, my husband and I watch TV. I have a chair that I sit in, he has a chair that he sits in. When I get in my chair, about half an hour later, I really have a craving to snack. It's because I'm in that chair. If I leave and go into a different room, say go into the living room to read, I don't have that urge. The location of, or the presence of certain people. I worked with a woman who was an account exec at IBM, and she was given a new client at one of her established clients. So she actually had a new person to work with. She was working with Oracle, and they brought in a young team that she was then asked to work with, and she had to work with a young man, and she was very assertive in working with him, and it turned out that she felt very threatened by him, that he felt as though IBM and her both were a dinosaur. So when she would go into the conference room and sit down with for a meeting with him, the minute he walked into the room and sat down, she could feel cortisol kind of coming through her veins, and then that kicked off the habit. Emotion, frustration, boredom, anger, being happy, having something really go well can kick off a habit. An action preceding the urge, something that happens that, happens to you every day, and then all of a sudden the habit is kicked off. So cues are feelings of anxiety, frustration, people being in a time crunch, anything that impacts you, that starts off this behavior is your cue. Does that make sense to everybody? So I'm going to skip now, and I'm going to go to the reward. So the reward is what happens at the very end. It's how your brain decides, should I keep this? It's how your prefrontal cortex says, this is good, more of this. It gives you some insights into what you're actually craving. So for example, if you think about the example that I used at the end, after I've had my coffee, I'm refocused. So the cue and the reward are always going to be part of the equation. They are always going to be there. They will not dissipate typically on their own. So you have to be aware of that, and you really have to put some thought into the reward. So for example, in a reward of interrupting was what you talked about, Ty. It is to fill in the silence. It's to make a timely point. It's to show you understand. It's to make sure you get your words in. It's to cut it short and get it done on time. So those are some of the things. Problem solving. So many of us in the business of learning and development, we're pleasers. So getting a problem solved, getting it out there, even if it's not to the benefit of the person we solved the problem for, it feels good to us. It's a great reward. Real quick, couple of rewards. Anybody like to share anything in the questions box? Rewards that you get once your habit is kicked off and finished. Feeling a happiness, yeah. Soothing, and you use external things to soothe ourselves. Deserve a reward. What else? Anybody? Satisfied? Sense of accomplishment? Yeah, so, the reward is something that we're craving, the prefrontal cortex wants that. So once again, it's what the ultimate end point is. So here's where the rubber kind of meets the road. We talk about the routine. It's where you go unconscious. So in knowing that it's always going to be 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or, there's that 1 o'clock conference call every Friday, and knowing that at the end of it, you are going to want some type of a reward from that. You're going to want that sense of accomplishment. You're going to want the boredom alleviated. Those are always going to be constant. So the real trick is to plan an alternate routine. So through observation and mindfulness, and this is a slow process, you can create a plan that breaks the subconscious behavior. It's like you have a thought, and before you do that action, there's that little space in there, and that's where you have the opportunity to kind of elongate it and really break down what's happening. So for example, if I think about my habit of having coffee at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, what I really want is to be refreshed. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to need some kind of a little bump or a pick-me-up. Alternate routines to that, for me, could be taking a walk, getting on a chat with somebody, calling somebody for 10 minutes, just anything to break it up and to get out of that routine. So for example, Ty, when you were talking about interrupting people and saying that, I'm afraid I'll lose my thought, you're absolutely right. What you did was write your thoughts on a piece of paper. That was great. For the woman who is, the IBM exec, she would arrive at the meetings early, sit herself down, and she would put her feet on the ground and take a couple of deep breaths. She also twisted her wedding ring. That was a habit that was actually a behavior she picked up. And by twisting her wedding ring, it really brought her back to why she was working. It's because she had a daughter that wanted to go to med school, and what she really cared about, her family. So she inserted that in place, got herself prepared while she was in there, and then was much calmer as a place to start from. And as a result, they tended to build a good relationship, her and the Oracle guy. A visual reminder not to interrupt. Is there something that you can place to remind yourself, or maybe a little rock with a word on it or something like that? When the urge presents itself, count to 6. Try something different. So in thinking about the habits that you have and that you are interested in working on, very broad brush, because we've just introduced this, but what are some of the alternate routines that you could do to alleviate interrupting someone, or to keep yourself on task, or to make yourself a better listener? Any thoughts? Any thoughts about alternate routines? Okay. All right. So, listening for understanding. Thanks, Leanne. Was somebody going to say something?
Yeah, this is Lewis again. Just a quick comment. Not so much an alternate routine, but I have actually asked people in a meeting to give me a secret signal if they see me doing something I really don't want to do, such as interrupting. I just say, hey, look, I'm working on this, and just tug on your ear if you see me doing this, or touch your
Oh,
nose or
that's
something
great.
like that. It's really goofy, but it really works. So you just have to find a trusted colleague and tell them what you're working on, and it does work. It's just a little goofy.
No, I think that's fantastic. I've heard of people doing like, if the presenter notices something, to walk by and put your hand on the shoulder, or, maybe a private chat message. I think that's wonderful. Writing things down is another good one. What else? Because I think as a group collectively, there's a lot of good information out there to mine. All right, so next steps, where do we go from here? We've kind of broken it down. We know what a habit consists of. We know how it gets started. We know that it's not going to break automatically. It's going to take a little bit of concentrated effort. So in the handout section, or I believe afterwards, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, there'll be a handout out there, and this is a very, very simple tool. It just asks you to observe the cue, routine, and reward, and then experiment with some alternate routines. Document your findings. Writing things down, it's going to help you to find patterns, to take a look at where you've gone, what you've tried, what typically happens, and then experiment, like I said before, with alternate behaviors to adopt in order to try to break the habit. It takes a while. And once you do find an alternate routine that works, as you know, it takes a while to put that into place and to get it to actually happen. But now you're armed with the knowledge of knowing what it's going to take to make the change. So it's up to you to be an observer of your own behavior, to be conscious as things are rolling along, and then to experiment. Any thoughts or questions? All right, so at this point, it's up to you. I'm ready to go change a habit. Thank you. Thank you, Leanne. I've got a feeling you will. It's a point in the road. You can change, or you can just go down the same road. And eventually, we get tired of it. So, I think that's part of the motivation that kind of kicks it off in really starting this whole process. Once again, a resource that I highly recommend. It's a good read, and some of you have probably heard of it. It's called The Power of Habit. And he talks about habits in business, and he uses examples of how products actually became developed or got developed because of habits that people have. Also, as an executive coach and an instructional designer, I do offer coaching programs, one-on-one personalized coaching or leadership development. And I also have a 4-session remote workshop that kind of blows out the pieces and gives you the opportunity to really work at a much deeper level on this topic. So any questions at all?
Looks like we do have a question. It says,
Okay.
can you give an example of each of the steps involved for Ty's question regarding interrupting people?
Okay. So Ty, are you available?
I am.
Okay. So if you think about interrupting people, what is your cue?
Okay, so for me, when someone is talking to me and they move on to the next subject without giving me a chance to respond, and they're closing out that one subject, and so I want to interject there before they move on to the next point. So that is probably a trigger for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say, well, and I find it sometimes in meetings, it's hard to jockey for position.
Mm-hmm.
The other trigger for me is sometimes when somebody is talking and they have made their point and then they make it again, and then they make it again, and then they make it again,
Yeah.
but they don't, and then maybe they're having trouble ending it or moving on to the, um, you know, closing it. Sometimes I feel to help close it, which is probably not my place, but hey,
No,
I'm being very vulnerable here, you guys. So, so those are some of the things. But usually, if there's a topic and I have a question or a point to make, and the person is moving on to the next, it feels like they've started onto another subject. That would be my cue to write down and just, hey, maybe let's circle back to that once. But sometimes, in a group, it's hard to get a chance to speak. So I don't know I haven't fixed it, so I don't know the cues I'm still working on it. The closest I've gotten to it is just writing things down and coming back to it.
That's a great example because I also am guilty of that. I have a really good friend who talks very softly and slowly and does say the same thing 3 or 4 times, and that's really frustrating to me. So it's kind of the action before the urge. So I understand that. So in thinking about this habit, let's just go back to our pre-work. What is it that is bad about it? I mean, what kind of impact is it having on you?
It's just rude. Some people see it as rude, or maybe they don't. I don't know. I think that sometimes they feel like what I may have to say is not valid at the point, is the emotion that goes with it. But for them, they may just feel that I'm being rude.
Okay. All right. And so, okay. So, and it may damage your relationship. You may
Yes.
not know, but it may damage your relationship. Okay. So if we think about it, then what is the reward? So we know kind of the impact that the habit has, why you'd want to change it, what what triggers the habit off. So what's the reward?
The reward is the relief of having, said, gotten out what I needed to say, or, that's the reward. But I don't know the reward of fixing the habit or the reward of, is that the question? I just want to make sure.
Yeah. So when you do that, when you do tend to interrupt, what do you get out of it? What is it that you make sure that you're heard, your opinion needs to be out there, right?
And the question is answered if it's a question, or that the point is considered. You know, that's mostly it.
Yeah. Okay. So in thinking, there's always going to be people like that. And, you're always going to need to get your point across. And rather than just interrupt, mid-sentence, I think your idea of writing it down so that you can remember it is a good one. And now I'm going to ask the group, anybody else have any other ideas or thoughts? How about you, Ty? Do you have any additional thoughts?
Um, well, the active listening in the past has helped me. I think this is a habit that I broke a while back, but it's resurfaced. So in work and working with clients and working with customers, I've learned, active listening, acknowledging what I've heard, and then making those points next. So those are habits that I had, but I lost those recently. So I'm trying to, you know, reinforce those habits.
Yeah, I think, once again, trial and error, but if it is something that you need to get across and it's timely, it's pertinent information, maybe just, when they go to take a breath, kind of interjecting yourself and say, I'd just like to, interject one point. Or if you get past the topic and they're moving on to the next topic, when you have a moment and they breathe, bring it back to that. So it's how you couch it when you get in there. to bring them back to it if it is information, especially with the client. It's important that they know at that time, your pieces of information about TrainingPros or whatever. Yeah, but I think, the idea of being able to hold yourself back is a big piece of it. So if there is some type of a reminder that you can put out for yourself, or once again, have a piece of paper and just have a word written on it, like steady, or, just something that's kind of a cue to you, put it in your mind and make your plan before you go into the meeting, or if it's a particular person, know that it's going to happen and be aware of it, how to pull yourself back. Where are some opportunities to interject, what's worked well, reading their body language or their voice, a lot of different things that you can try. Anyone else? Good. Once again, thank you and all the best to you. I hope that everyone has some success with this method and process. And please feel free to contact me and reach out if you have any more questions or would like more information or just to talk. It's jhodack@gmail.com, and also I have a website at Hodack Consulting. So thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy your holidays, and I hope that this was helpful. Thanks, Louis.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. That was awesome. I'm definitely glad that I attended today. So, and
Good.
thank you everybody else for joining us today. I hope that you got something out of this webinar, and also thank you for choosing to spend time with TrainingPros today. Stay tuned for upcoming webinars. If you are interested in receiving more information about our future events, just email us at elizabeth.paturi@trainingpros.com. And when you have more project than people, we can provide you with L&D consultant to start your project with confidence. Thank you so much, everybody. And if anybody else has anything to say, go ahead and say goodbye here.
Thank
Thanks, Melissa. And if you have any closing messages, you can do that here.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. And just as a reminder that there is a handout section in the control panel. If you see in the control panel, you'll see the 2 handouts if you have not had the opportunity to download them. And we will close in 30 seconds. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
you too.
Thanks. Goodbye.